So imagine this, it's March 3rd, 1876, and you're in Olympia Springs, Kentucky. You look up to the sky and see large chunks of fresh meat falling from it like, well, large snowflakes. I mean, how would you explain that? What are the first few thoughts that come to your head? Are you scared, confused, hungry? Well, whatever your reaction may be, you wouldn't be alone, because in addition to being one of the stranger things ever witnessed by humans, this bizarre event also happened to the residents of Olympia Springs, Kentucky, an event now known as the Great Kentucky Meat Shower or the Kentucky Shower of Flesh. And while some explanations are more grounded than others, there's no consensus on exactly what caused this odd phenomenon. On the morning of March, Olympia Springs residents awoke to what was described as a beautiful day. Clear skies with the only disturbance being a light breeze. This would continue throughout the day until around 4 p.m. when the breeze picked up. Many residents went outside to investigate, and many of them looked up to the sky to try and figure out where the breeze was coming from. That's when they saw large chunks of flesh falling from the sky, most of which were about 5 times 5 cm, but some were as big as 25 centimeters long. The pieces were white or yellowish and glistened in the sunlight. Some fell slowly and gracefully like snowflakes, while others fell quickly, whipping through the air like stones. The pieces also appeared to be quite heavy, causing trees and shrubs to bend under their weight. One resident recalled the sound the meat made as it struck the trees, saying, "It hit the limbs just about as the thud of a heavy hammer on an anvil." And yet, despite the fact that the shower lasted for about 30 minutes, no one was injured. To add further to the strangeness of the event, it wasn't really raining. While the pieces of flesh were falling from the sky remained crystal clear and sunny. In fact, it wasn't even cloudy, according to reports. It was so clear that residents could see the distinct markings on the barn roofs across the valley. As one resident put it, "I could see the clapboards distinctly and read the name John Smith painted on the side of one of them." Many residents ran to their homes to get their guns, thinking they were witnessing a bizarre sort of hailstorm made of flesh. But those who ran outside again after grabbing their weapons found the sky clear, and the only evidence of the shower being the small number of pieces of meat that had landed on the ground. Those pieces were still warm and smelled like a strong, sweet musk. Despite being fresh, no one panicked. The shower itself didn't seem dangerous, and the people of Olympia Springs seemed to assume that it was some kind of animal, perhaps some sort of large bird or flying creature. But it wasn't until 2 days later that these assumptions were tested. See, 2 men named Richard and John Hayes had gone out into the forest after the shower to look for pieces of meat, which they planned to eat if they could find any. They managed to find some, and without any hesitation, Richard Hayes cut off a chunk and put it on his bread. After tasting it, he said the meat reminded him of venison, while John thought it tasted more like mutton. Then, as if to prove this point, the Hayes brothers managed to find some bones, which they took back to town to show everyone. Most people agreed that the bones resembled those of a sheep. This is all according to the accounts of Dr. Thomas Hume, who lived in nearby Lebanon, Kentucky. Hume wrote about the Kentucky meat shower in an article for the Medical News, a medical newspaper published in Cincinnati. He said that some people in Olympia Springs wanted the meat to be delivered to the State Medical Society in Louisville, but the meat spoiled before anyone could come to an agreement about what to do with it. However, Hume did say that two histologists got their hands on some of the meat and analyzed it. Their conclusion was that at least the pieces they had access to was made up of lung tissue, muscular tissue, and cartilage. But they were unable to determine what kind of animal it came from. Hume himself offered a potential explanation for the phenomenon, saying something like this probably occurred in the following manner. A flock of sheep or other animals was driven across the mountains to the bluegrass region. The herders camped near a high cliff or mountain ledge where they butchered and dried some of their meat, which was afterwards thrown over the precipice. Some time after this, A high wind from the southwest swept over the mountain and carried with it a portion of the dried meat, which floated about till it reached the valley of the Bull Fork of the Kentucky River, where it was precipitated to the earth in flakes. While it sounds reasonable enough, Hume admitted that it was just a guess, and today, many believe the meat shower may have been the result of something else entirely, like a freak tornado. But unlike the Hayes brothers, they wouldn't have gotten hungry just because they found some. See, back in 1985, a man named J.T. Mitchell wrote a story called A Rare Occurrence for Reader's Digest. The story was about the Kentucky meat shower, and it offered a different explanation for the event. According to Mitchell, who was quoting an unnamed local historian, a tornado sucked up a bunch of meat from a slaughterhouse in Nashville, Tennessee, and deposited it near Olympia Springs, Kentucky. Of course, this would have been sometime between the afternoon of March and the evening of March, since tornadoes tend to happen pretty quickly and usually aren't accompanied by 30-minute showers of flash. Mitchell also pointed out that 1876 was the year that marks the beginning of modern record-keeping for tornadoes in the United States, making it likely that the tornado in question would have been unrecorded or misreported. Unfortunately, we don't know if this account was based on a real interview or if the historian Mitchell referenced was completely made up. And we don't know much about tornadoes back then, so it's hard to say whether or not something like this could have really happened. However, if it did, it wouldn't be the first time a tornado was responsible for an unusual shower. In 2007, one was recorded that lifted thousands of catfish out of a lake in Alabama and dropped them onto a nearby highway. But that was a fish, not a meat shower, and the fish were alive, whereas the meat in Kentucky was fresh, definitely not raining frogs or toads. In 2010, a report was made about a sudden increase in amphibian deaths near Albert Lea, Minnesota. People living in the area reported seeing dead frogs and toads falling from the sky, and those who lived closer to Albert Lea Lake were understandably concerned about the water quality. State officials collected samples of the dead amphibians and sent them off to be tested. They also deployed nets to collect any live frogs or toads that may have been falling but hadn't quite fallen yet. They didn't find any live ones, but their testing did reveal why so many frogs and toads had been dying. The culprit was a naturally occurring algae bloom, which produces a toxin deadly to amphibians, but not fish or mammals. So the good news is that the meat shower in Kentucky was probably safe to eat. But the bad news is that if you ate enough of it, you may have gotten sick. But maybe that's not such bad news if you consider the alternative. If it really was a tornado that caused the shower, the meat could have come from cows, pigs, or even chickens. And while chicken is pretty tasty, it is hard to imagine it falling from the sky in large chunks and looking quite so much like deer meat, unless of course you had your mind blown by the events that transpired in West Memphis, Arkansas back in 2003. Then you've heard the phrase, "It's raining cats and dogs." But what if it was literally raining flesh? We'll let you decide exactly what kind of flesh that is. Thanks for watching. Maybe like the people in Kentucky, you're hungry now, or maybe you're just disgusted. Either way, we appreciate you sticking with us. Be sure to subscribe so you can catch our newest videos. And you should definitely check out this video right here, which we think you'll really enjoy.